Don't you hate it when the hype train builds to an anticlimax? Welcome to Watch Mojo, and today we're counting down our picks for the top 20 disappointing movies of the century so far. For this list, we're looking at movies released from the year 2000 onward that promised us so much and delivered so little. While not all of these movies are downright awful per se, we definitely wouldn't say no to a full refund.
My sympathies.
Oh, I believe, sister.
Number 20, Quantum of Solace.
Bond, I need you back.
I never left.
After the Pierce Brosnan era ended on such a humiliating note, the James Bond franchise came roaring back to life with Casino Royale. With a grittier tone and Daniel Craig's darker portrayal, we were ready for a new golden age of 007. While Quantum of Solace is by no means the worst Bond movie, it was a significant step backwards coming off such a game changer. Whereas Casino Royale took chances around every corner, this sequel played it safe with non-stop action, a forgettable plot, and little insight into the man behind the spy. Thankfully, Skyfall got Bond back on track, although the series hit another rough patch with the mixed bag that was Spectre. We're noticing a Star Trek-like pattern with these movies. Number 19, The Mummy. While not many people were pleading with Universal to develop a dark universe, the idea of seeing all the classic monsters join forces definitely showed promise.
What the hell is that?
In what's gotta be a record, The Mummy killed the cinematic universe right out of the sarcophagus. Actually, this wasn't even Universal's first attempt at a shared universe of monsters, as Dracula Untold was originally seen as a potential launching point. The fact that Universal dropped the ball twice made The Mummy all the more infuriating. This movie started world building without even deciding what it wanted to be. Combining elements of the Avengers, Mission Impossible, and the Brendan Fraser Mummy movies, Universal turned in a muddled mess that tried pleasing everybody, but satisfied nobody.
You saw that, right?
You were gonna leave me!
You saw it, right?
I can't unsee it!
Number 18, The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. The LXG brings together some of literature's most famous figures, from Tom Sawyer to Captain Nemo to Henry Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. At the forefront is the OG James Bond, Sean Connery, as Alan Quatermain. Throw in the director of Blade and you have a snooze fest?
I thought I was special. You were invulnerable to harm.
I don't like to boast.
Given the colorful cast of characters, not to mention the inventive source material by Alan Moore and Kevin O'Neill, this movie should have had no trouble living up to its title. There's nothing extraordinary about this steampunk adventure, however. That is, unless we're talking about how extraordinarily dull it is. We're not saying that this movie killed any careers, although Stephen Norrington hasn't directed anything since, and Connery did retire right after. So, yeah, this was kind of a career killer.
Stay back if you value your life.
Number 17, Jurassic Park 3. Jurassic Park was the highest-grossing movie upon release, and even decades later, it is still what many of us associate with the term blockbuster.
So I don't suppose that check you wrote us is any good.
All right, now, listen to me. I will pay you the money that I owe you, no matter what.
While The Lost World wasn't on the same level as its predecessor, it at least understood that a Jurassic Park movie is supposed to feel epic. None of that gravitas is on display in Jurassic Park 3. Everything from the uninspired title to the inexplicably brief runtime comes off as phoned in.
Hello?
The special effects aren't especially special, the plot feels like it was recycled from a B-movie, and the dinosaurs lack the dread that they once filled us with. Well, that's what happens when you trade in a Tyrannosaurus Rex for a Spinosaurus. Seriously, are you trying to be a downgrade? Number 16, The Hangover Part II.
Seriously, what is wrong with you three?
So much, Trace, I don't even know where to begin.
We'll admit that The Hangover isn't exactly the easiest movie to make a sequel to. The 2009 hit told a self-contained story about three guys trying to piece together their wild night of drunken escapades. Aside from where the chicken came from, everything is resolved by the end. So what can you do beyond that? Apparently nothing, because The Hangover Part 2 was the exact same movie, save a change of scenery and substituting a monkey for the chicken.
What happened?
It literally feels like they copy and pasted the first movie's script, changed a couple of words, and called it a day. On top of being unbelievably lazy, this sequel is bizarrely mean-spirited, with one character losing a finger. Who wrote this thing, Arthur Fleck? Number 15, Lady in the Water. It may sound strange now, but there was a time when M. Night Shyamalan was hailed as the new master of horror. While the endings to Signs and The Village were polarizing, audiences still got excited whenever they heard the name Shyamalan. Alas, Lady in the Water is where Shyamalan officially went off the deep end, forever changing the public's perception of him. The film was apparently inspired by a bedtime story Shyamalan cooked up for his kids, but the script reads more like something you jot down on a bar napkin after having one too many.
It's precisely the moment where the mutation or beast will attempt to kill an unlikable side character.
This is the very definition of a vanity project, right down to Shyamalan himself playing a savior of sorts and a cynical film critic getting his comeuppance. Subtle.
I'm not anything, you know. I don't think I'm anything special.
Number 14, Aragon.
What's happening?
Brom was right, Aragon. The time of the Dragon Riders has come again.
This adaptation of Christopher Paolini's fantasy novel came out following Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings trilogy and the first few Harry Potter movies. It really shows in the end product, which feels like a half-hearted attempt to cash in on the swords and sorcerers trend.
Magic must be your last resort. It has rules, it has limitations.
There is nothing remotely unique about the film, from the stock characters to the generic setting to the formulaic plot. Some critics may argue that the source material suffered from similar issues, but one thing that Paolini's book got down that this movie didn't was the bond between Aragon and his dragon Saphira. That's what gave the story a beating heart, but their relationship is far too rushed and exposition-heavy here. Thus, this planned film franchise immediately went up in smoke. Number 13, Fantastic Beasts: The Crimes of Grindelwald.
We may not know who he is yet, but he needs to be found. And I rather hope you might be the one to find him.
The first Fantastic Beasts was a promising start to a new chapter in the wizarding world. But sadly, The Crimes of Grindelwald sucked out much of the wonder and whimsy that made people fall in love with J.K. Rowling's original creation. Rowling's screenplay needlessly shoehorned in characters from the books without doing anything interesting with them. This took away from screen time that could have been used to develop Newt, Tina, and other principal characters. The story somehow managed to be both convoluted and uneventful, making The Crimes of Grindelwald feel like a minor stepping stone in a franchise that fans aren't even sure they want anymore. Plus, there were barely any Fantastic Beasts this time around.
Mr. Scamander,
Do you think Dumbledore will mourn for you?
Number 12, The Dark Tower. If the past decade proved anything, it's that the works of Stephen King are still ripe for Hollywood.
Who are you?
It's you. I'm Jake. Jake Chambers.
Since the Dark Tower series is largely seen as his crowning achievement, it seemed like a good idea to bring the gunslinger and the man in black to the silver screen. Rather than focusing on the page-turning rivalry between those two, however, the film saw little Jake Chambers take center stage. The results thus felt less like The Dark Tower and more like a last-ditch effort to cash in on the dwindling young adult movie craze. The film wasn't even a direct adaptation of King's books, instead delivering a bland continuation that confused newcomers, enraged fans, and completely missed the point of its source material.
Stop hiding behind your magic and face me, Walter!
Number 11, Zoolander 2. This long-awaited sequel immediately got off on the wrong foot, revealing that Derek's wife is dead, his son got taken away, and his center for kids who can't read good has been destroyed.
Maybe it's time to engage with the world again. Think about it, man. This could be a sign.
What if it's a stop sign, Billy?
Because that's what we wanted to see happen to Derek after 15 years. But hey, the plot doesn't really matter in a Zoolander movie. Zoolander 2's biggest crime is that it's virtually devoid of anything resembling comedy.
You're right.
Whew. What happened to us?
Whereas the first film was stupid yet clever, this follow-up wound up being just plain dumb and even lazy. Not only were the celebrity cameos totally wasted, but a majority of the gags were recycled. Didn't anyone working on the film notice this? It feels like we're taking crazy pills. Number 10, Prometheus. With Ridley Scott returning to the director's chair, fans were ready for Prometheus to breathe new life into the Alien franchise.
how far would you go to get what you came all this way for?
This prequel admittedly wasn't without some stunning visuals, intriguing ideas, and compelling performances, particularly from Noomi Rapace and Michael Fassbender. Instead of delving deeper into this universe's mythology, though, the film just asked a ton of questions with few answers. Did we mention the co-creator of Lost co-wrote this? We're not saying that this movie needed to explain everything, but the mysteries laid out here aren't exactly gripping, and in the end, we don't really care what it all meant. While not the franchise's darkest hour, Prometheus was nonetheless a snooze fest, and the last thing we should be in an alien movie is bored.
It's time for us to go home.
Number 9. The Terminator sequels, reboots, and sequel boots. If we had to single out one franchise that's let us down the most this past decade, it would have to be The Terminator. Coming off 2 near-perfect movies, Rise of the Machines was just a little too awkward and goofy.
Catherine Brewster.
What are you doing? Let me down!
Salvation had the opposite problem, tearing out the franchise's soul in favor of grainy action.
Look at me. That's why I don't trust you. I'm the only hope you have.
Genesis attempted to wipe the slate clean, but it somehow left the slate even messier than before. Dark Fate was essentially an apology for the past 3 films, and while it tried much harder to please longtime fans, it was still too little too late. The happily ever after alternate ending to Terminator 2 might have been corny, but we'd gladly take it over 4 disappointing sequels, and counting. Number 8. Green Lantern. Deadpool isn't the only one who would love to expunge this movie from Ryan Reynolds' resume.
You're impertinent, Hal Jordan. You're rash, volatile, opinionated. It seems Abin-Sur found another just like himself.
For decades, Green Lantern was one of the most beloved and respected heroes in the DC pantheon. After this lackluster adaptation landed, though, Green Lantern started to become the butt of the joke, and it's gonna take an incredible reboot to restore his former glory. Until then, we're stuck with an uninspired origin story that falls back on every overused superhero trope and packs in so much CGI that it could be mistaken for a cartoon. We're just glad that Reynolds went on to make much better superhero movies, and so did his co-star Taika Waititi. Yeah, you forgot he was in this too, didn't you?
Ah, green! Wow. I know, right?
Number 7. The Hobbit franchise. Given the success of Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings trilogy, it was only a matter of time until The Hobbit hit theaters. Fans were given cause for concern when news broke that this relatively short children's book was being turned into a 2-movie epic, which inevitably became a 3-movie epic.
If we have read these signs, do you not think others will have read them too?
Although the Hobbit trilogy had a theatrical runtime of almost 8 hours, we didn't get to know anybody very well. The dwarves were mostly glorified extras, the new characters contributed little, and even Bilbo got lost in the shuffle. If you edited the trilogy's best bits into a single film, we'd have a worthy successor to The Lord of the Rings. As is, though, getting through this drawn-out journey could feel like a chore.
That orc scum is in there. I say we push on. No. That's what he wants. He wants to draw us in.
Number 6. Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. Between George Lucas's Star Wars prequels and Steven Spielberg giving E.T. an unnecessary CGI makeover, the writing was truly on the wall for this 4th Indiana Jones crusade. Nevertheless, we all went into the theater wearing optimistic smiles, but left with our faces melted. We're all familiar with the laundry list of criticisms for this movie. The inconceivable presence of aliens, the over-reliance on CGI, the complete disregard for the laws of refrigerator physics, Shia LaBeouf playing Indy's son, etc. What's worse, the film was coming off a universally beloved trilogy that many felt ended on just the right note almost 2 decades earlier. Whatever adventures lie on the horizon for Dr. Jones, it's hard to imagine a bigger letdown than this. Number 5. The Last Airbender. On the one hand, anyone who is looking forward to The Last Airbender should have known they were setting themselves up for disappointment.
Okay, everybody can help us now!
As wonderful as the animated series is, you can't condense an entire season's worth of storylines into a feature film and expect the same results. On the other hand, it was a live-action version of Avatar. At the bare minimum, this adaptation should have offered some inventive action sequences, inspired casting choices, and fun recreations of beloved scenes. With M. Night Shyamalan helming the project, however, the action was sluggish, the casting was mystifying, and the best moments from the show were robbed of their humanity. Whatever the in-development live-action Netflix series has in store for us, at least nothing will ever be worse than this.
Why?
He had a vision at the Southern Air Temple prayer field. He talked to a dragon spirit who he thinks can help us. He thinks if he goes to another spiritual place, he can get back to the spirit world.
I don't think that's a good idea.
Number 4, X-Men: The Last Stand.
Come on!
Grow those back.
Sure, X-Men Origins was more insulting, but we were prepared for the worst by that point. The Last Stand, on the other hand, was the follow-up to 2 of the century's most influential superhero movies. This third installment is far more bombastic than its predecessors, which would be alright if it had strong character development and a focused narrative to back it up. Unfortunately, the film packs in far too many characters, some of which primarily exist just to be unceremoniously axed, and the story is all over the place.
Logan, you're making me blush.
You reading my thoughts?
I don't have to.
What should have been an epic conclusion to the initial trilogy instead ended with a facepalm. After such a colossal disappointment, at least Hollywood would never make the same mistakes in another superhero movie, right? Number 3, Spider-Man 3.
My God, Eddie.
Ooh, my spider sense is tingling. If you know what I'm talking about.
It's funny/infuriating how Sam Raimi's Spider-Man trilogy followed the same trajectory as the X-Men trilogy. The first 2 set a new standard for superhero movies, and their impact is still felt today. The scars that the third movie left behind remain intact as well. Like many other modern blockbusters, Spider-Man 3 was so focused on fan service that it never stopped to consider what fans truly want: a coherent story. The film shoehorned in a plethora of villains, supporting players, and ideas that could never be fleshed out in just one movie. While the Spider-Man franchise would live on, this film demolished our faith in Sony, as well as our interest in this particular continuity. And all it took was one emo haircut. Number 2, The Matrix Revolutions. While The Matrix Reloaded had its issues, we were willing to let those shortcomings slide as long as Revolutions provided a landing.
Okay, you got yourself in here. You can get yourself out.
This grand finale didn't just fly too close to the sun, however. It flew directly into the sun and caused the lights to go out, submerging the franchise into nearly 2 decades of perpetual darkness. Perhaps the most disappointing aspect of this Matrix sequel is that it doesn't delve much deeper into the actual Matrix. Instead, we get to watch Neo hanging out at a subway, people standing around talking, and a climax that rips off everything from Aliens to Dragon Ball Z. It all builds to a hokey storybook ending complete with a rainbow that needs to be retconned in Matrix 4.
Will we ever see him again?
I suspect so. Someday.
I sound like a broken record, but The Dark Tower was a travesty, and it's only number 12 on this list. Can you imagine how disappointing our number 1 is gonna be? Let's look through some honorable or dishonorable mentions, and then we'll find out which 21st century movie has bummed us out the most so far.
I love you. Good morning.
The basic concept is this. I play an LAPD cop who isn't who he seems. He's a paranoid schizophrenic who has a supernatural gift. He sees things.
You're Frank Walker, right? My name's Casey, and I want you to take me there.
Take you where?
Why are they screaming?
No. They're not screaming.
They're celebrating.
God, they booked me, man.
He says orcs. War solves everything.
Then why is he here?
Gante il go il cause vergay.
To save my people.
You boys thought you could come in here and steal all these beautiful things? What a perfect idea.
Before we continue, be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos. You have the option to be notified for occasional videos or all of them. If you're on your phone, make sure you go into your settings and switch on notifications. Number 1. Batman vs. Superman: Dawn of Justice.
You're letting him kill Martha.
What does that mean? Why did you say that name?
You could argue that Suicide Squad was the lesser film, but the DCEU's avalanche of disappointments started with this train wreck. How do you screw up a live-action movie that finally unites Batman and Superman on the big screen? For that matter, how do you botch a movie that borrows from The Dark Knight Returns and The Death of Superman? Well, you remove all the color, cram in a dozen other DC characters, cast Jesse Eisenberg as Lex Luthor, and hire the guy who directed Sucker Punch to tie it all together. That's how.
Boys, Bruce Wayne meets Clark Kent. I love it. I love bringing people together. How are we?
Batman vs. Superman was such a colossal letdown that our hopes for Justice League were crushed. And we're just gonna say it, the Snyder Cut would not have magically fixed everything. Do you agree with our picks? Check out this other recent clip from WatchMojo, and be sure to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified about our latest videos.